Since our audience are from varied backgrounds, my first question is fairly introductory. So, what is a net zero carbon building, and how is it different from a net zero energy building?
Okay, so that's an interesting one, I would say. So, carbon emissions in specifically buildings are of two kinds. So, one is embodied carbon, and the other one is operational carbon. So, basically, embodied carbon is the carbon emissions during the construction stage of a building. So, these can be through usage of various materials in buildings, like, commonly used ones like steel, cement, concrete, etc. And operational carbon is emissions during the operation of the building, when the building is operating, when there are humans inside and we are using that building. So that say example of this would be emissions due to electricity, which we generally use in our buildings, or say LPG for cooking gas, or diesel in generator sets. So that is the different kind, that is a operational carbon. Okay, so net zero carbon buildings, so when you talk about net zero carbon, it accounts for both operational carbon as well as embodied carbon. Okay, but however, we look into, say, net zero energy building, that only talks about net zero, so that only talks about operational carbon. So basically net zero energy buildings are where you, for example, say if for a net zero building, I would say in your home, if you are using 1,000 units of electricity across the year, okay, and then if you have a solar PV on your roof, and then you are producing the same 1,000 kilowatt or same 1,000 units across the year, then your home is going to be net zero energy. So net zero energy is, not that difficult to do in these times, but net zero carbon buildings are very difficult to do, considering, we have to start looking into the life cycle of it. We have to start looking into the...
Hi, Mansi.
Hello, hi. Sorry, there's a glitch here.
No problem. So you were saying there are two types of carbons, embodied carbon and operational carbon.
Yes. And net zero building would look into only, net zero energy building would look into only operational aspect of it and not the embodied carbon aspect of it.
And you mentioned it is difficult, so you mentioned it is difficult to achieve a net zero carbon building. And why is that?
Okay. So net zero carbon building, because it talks about embodied emission. And accounting for embodied emission across the globe is difficult, because it would account for the steel which you are using in the building, with the cement you are using in the building, the concrete you are using in the building, and then you have to, all of these would have a process energy associated to it. So they are processed on site, and then there is a transport aspect of it, right? So basically it would account for the whole thing. So it has been made on the different, it is made in different industry. It is transported to your site, and then you are using it. So you have to account for both where you are calculating the embodied carbon. So hence it is difficult to calculate, and it's difficult to do, because data set is not very much available in India, I would say. The data set of embodied carbon emissions have been, EPDs for all the buildings are available for when we start looking into countries like Europe, European nations and US. Those are now steadily available, but however, getting those information for India is a little bit difficult. So that's the reason.
Got it. But Mansi, for India, when it comes to our Indian context, we are all aware that our per capita carbon emission is way lesser compared to the global average, and even 7 times lesser than the developed countries. Correct. But still, why is it important that we decarbonize our building sectors?
Okay. So I like to think that, Indians in principle are resource efficient as compared to West. I would like to say that in aspect of recycling and circular economy, that has been ingrained to us right from the beginning of our childhood. So, there's a popular saying that Kal ka t-shirt is aaj ka pocha. So basically that means that, whatever tattered clothes we used to have, our parents are using it and it's sort of, they're used as dish rags. Or say broken things directly go to scrap sellers. Not unlike our counterparts in USA that directly go to the bins. So that's not the case. So we are already have some parts of circular economy and some parts of resource efficiency. It has been ingrained in us. However, and also, so that is one of the reasons where there is so much discrepancy in terms of per capita emissions when we start looking into it. However, having said that, the per capita emissions are lesser. However, when we start looking into the global context in terms of total emissions, India is almost third largest carbon emitter across the globe after US and China. Okay,
Yeah.
so per capita is one thing, and when we start looking into the overall global emissions, they're still number 3. And I would like to say that as per Paris Climate Agreement, it has been agreed that we all have to reduce our emissions by in certain amount to reduce the global temperature rise by 1.5 degree, and that carbon emissions is directly related to climate change. And I would like to say climate change is no longer a myth, right? We are all feeling the pinch here and there, Say today it becomes, it's actually today's reality. We were taught about in class 3, but now we are facing it. We never thought that. 5 years, 7 years down the line, you ask me, you really think that it is is going to happen? I would say, yeah, probably sometime. But now that is what we are facing, right? So probably flooding in Kochi, or every year there is floods in Assam, or there is a heat wave in extreme heat conditions in Gujarat, or increased forest fires in Northeast. So all of that are impacts of climate change. So as a nation, we have to start we have to start taking measures for decarbonizing, and then because in order to curb the climate change in future. So, and however, I would like to say that India is a growing nation, right? We all know that, it has been said that 70% of our buildings is yet to be built. So it is correct time, I think. As in a country, we should start looking into the decarbonization of our
to take the right
sector.
steps.
Absolutely. And then there is energy dependency as well, right? So currently we are dependent so much on for crude oil from countries like Russia or USA or Emirate nations. So, but over the period of time, energy efficiency is required to reduce the energy dependency over the other nations. So,
because it often comes as a debating point. Should a developing country actually invest into, we should actually look into developing our infrastructure and growing, whereas the developed countries, this becomes a point of debate in most cases when it comes to climate financing and everything. I'm glad, but we don't realize all this is directly linked to climate change. And if we don't take action today, then when, right?
Yeah, we are going to face the future. It was something that, probably next 2 generations they are going to face issues, but it's not like that anymore. We are facing the issues, so we are feeling that pinch. So that's very much required.
Mansi, this question might be there in a lot of our viewers. So how is that one designs a carbon conscious building? Is there a particular procedure, or is there like a steps that one takes? So as a sustainability consultant, maybe we all could get a better idea about life cycle thinking and how to incorporate it in our designs.
Yeah, so life cycle thinking is a way of thinking that includes economic, environmental, and social consequences of a product process through the life of the building, so that we have to start looking into each of the products which has gone into it. So, However, I would like to say that, I would like to give do's and don'ts specifically to the to our audience, right? What exactly not to do. Because process, I understand, we have been looking into energy efficient buildings, so that can be through passive design strategies, through efficient envelope, HVAC systems, and material selection, and all of that. But I would today like to discuss what exactly not to do based on my experience so far. For say, what we have seen so far in the projects I have worked on is, there is, if wherever possible, we should, start reusing a particular set of buildings with minor minor changes if possible, or say refurbishing a couple of buildings if possible. So that is one thing. When we take that issue to architects, we are doing the same thing in one of our projects. And then it's very difficult to discuss that with architects, saying that, they'll always come back saying that, do you really think we want to build something, we don't want to reuse the same building, but, the best way to reduce carbon emissions is reusing a building in, say, that can be a adaptive reuse, using the same building in another form or a way. So that's the first thing, which very controversial, but our audience should account for. They should start thinking across the same lines, or say segregation of our demolition waste. So what if there is a possibility, if the building has to be demolished, then they should start looking into to divert whatever the demolition waste has been done throughout the construct during the demolition. So to say, in a couple of projects, what we are trying to do is, we have done so far is diverted 95% of waste from the landfills. So we segregate the waste, and then that goes into it. Reuse or recycle. In a couple of projects, what we have done is we reused the ducts which were there on site. They were in good condition. We started using that. We had things like rebar, so steel. So in a couple of projects, there was a possibility of using that on the rooftop. So we started looking into those aspects. So those are small aspects where we start looking into the reusing of the material, whichever is available to us. The second is, if then the next goes to the recyclers, and then segregation of it is done. And recycling, I would say that for recycling, a couple of companies convert their cement and concrete waste to the paver blocks. So we suggest that to clients, and then and then everything else goes to the scrap vendors. So these aspects should be taken in account when demolishing a building. And what I have seen so far, I was amazed to see that maximum emissions in a building happens in the basement, building a basement. I have seen that in person of one of our projects in Hyderabad. I was working in Microsoft Hyderabad project, and I went there on site because for them, we have to calculate emissions at each of the sector. Okay, for Microsoft, they want to be net zero by 2030, the next 8 years, right? So, and they ask us, so they are looking into LEED Zero, which talks about embodied energy. They are also looking into other rating system like ILFI Zero Carbon, which talks specifically about embodied carbon and net zero, not only energy, but the whole life cycle carbon and all of that. So when I was there on site, I saw that, oh my God, the emissions during that stage was critical. Because you could see that those, all the equipment which were used on site were diesel operated. There's no electrification for this. And, there were fumes coming out of it, vapor. My God, so much CO2, so much PM 2.5. Difficult, the amount of energy. First, you have to dig up the soil. Then you probably use so much of steel and concrete and reinforcement. It was such an eye-opening thing for me. I don't think I can ever unsee that. So generally, for all the clients which I go henceforward, I say that please try to reduce the basement as much as possible. Please don't do it. So
have multi-level car parking separately. Maybe I don't know if that's a good option.
Yeah, those are the things which we suggest, Then probably, if possible, have one MLCP across the campus, and then probably have shaded walkways for occupants to start walking into the same. What happens, these designs has to be occupant conscious as well, you know. So what
True.
happens, what I've observed so far, they'll tell you that our whole campus is walkable, and then they
Mhm.
don't provide any shading. So how
Yeah.
how do you think one person is going to go from one end to the other? If you don't have shaded walkways, you are going to go nuts. You're not going to use it. So
Very.
yeah, so all of those are climate conscious design, I would say, which has to be, which comes with experience, but which has to be accounted for in all the campuses
And these
going
are very
forward.
minor design
Exactly.
interventions, right? Like,
Correct, exactly. So small things. Oh, yeah, I would like to say, you know, both of us were working on one of the projects, if I don't know, I saw Surendra here. So for Aga Khan Academy, remember?
oh yeah.
Uh, yeah, they had these, you know, shaded walkways. So Aga Khan Academy, for our viewers, I'll tell you, is a residential school in Hyderabad. They had provided, it's a lead platinum building. Okay, and they have provided walkable, they have provided shaded pathways for students to walk in. Okay, and what happened during, and they were covered with planters on the top. So they were pergolas with planters on the top. So what happened during summers? You remember, Shruti, right? We're all charred. All the creepers were charred on
True.
the pergolas, and then they figured out later that, you know, that was happening because they had provided MS sections for those pergolas.
It
So
had
there was
heated
no
up
shading
and
anymore in summers, which is
true.
definitely required. So those are
Yes.
small, minor design changes, or, you know, one has to account for when when considering occupant thermal comfort and designing for sustainability, I would say.
True. And outdoor thermal comfort, I think it's fairly new concept to a lot of pedestrian comfort and everything.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
Yeah.
So because what's happening is all the campuses wants to reduce their carbon emissions in terms of transport. You know,
Yeah.
they are trying to improve the
Yes.
walkability across the campus. So
Yes.
some companies like TCS or Microsoft are, you know, asking employees to take a short walk from
Cycling.
building to building. Yeah,
Yes.
cycling, all of that.
True.
But I mean, they have to also be considerate about the climate which we have here in India. You can't
Yeah.
cycle during 12, you can't
True.
cycle at 12, you know, 12 p.m. in the
Yeah.
afternoon or 12 to 4. It's so difficult, right?
Very true.
So, yeah, so then occupant thermal comfort plays an important role here for them to, you know, take in account for. So, yeah, that's fairly new term, but it is very relevant in current market scenario, I would say.
In general, comfort is a topic that needs a lot of importance, and we need to talk a lot about even indoor occupant comfort as well.
Correct.
Uh, so I'll just maybe brief a little about the points you
Yes.
mentioned. We need to look into recycling, even be conscious about the materials that if there are demolished waste, can we reuse it? So one needs to be conscious regarding the materials that goes into the building and what will be the end product of it. I hope I got it right.
Yes, absolutely. You got the gist of it, Shruti. Yeah.
So is there any like tools that can help us figure this out probably?
In terms of when you are looking into the embodied carbon aspect of it,
Yes.
yeah, there are carbon calculator. So when we start looking into embodied carbon, there are carbon calculators which are available. So for embodied carbons, LCA is the simplest way to do it. There are online softwares like One Click LCA, which would give you
Hmm.
all of these details once you start
True.
feeding in all of the data of the processes which has been involved, of the materials which we have used. It is going to give you the data set, and it would give you the brief of how much carbon has gone into your construction process. So yeah, you can do that.
In many places in Europe, and even I'm not sure, I've heard it, they have made it mandatory that they do LCA prior to getting the building permit. And if
Yes.
such practices come up in India, do you think it will be practical to maybe implement such things? I often have this thing, like instead of probably Instagrammable pictures or aesthetic views, that's important. But along with it, if architects are also ready to reveal the energy demands of their buildings or even carbon emissions of their buildings, if they are ready to publicly reveal the data, and if a policy is there that mandates that they have to reveal it, do you think there'll be a reduction in our demands? And do you think such policies are implementable here?
There are a couple of things. I think it would improve. Okay, what you're talking about would definitely improve our energy efficiency or our discussion around embodied carbon. So those are beneficial. However, I think the first step to go about it is through energy efficiency. As I told, 70% of our stock is yet to be constructed. So we have to be mindful of embodied carbon and the whole life carbon approach. However, the first step for a country like India is through energy efficiency. How do you think someone is going to, our architects are not aware about energy conservation building code, ECBC, which first came in 2009 and recently got they had changed it in
Eco-Nivas is
2017.
also available.
Yes, there is Eco-Nivas Samhita that is for residential setup, which is coming in 2018, I would believe so. And then, however, there are a couple of projects in PMAY, so that is Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. So for those low middle class families, they are going for Eco-Nivas Samhita. They have, I believe so, in a couple of states, they are started to mandate it. So, however, I think the first step for us is energy efficiency, and it is also important for us to start looking into embodied carbon and things of do's and don'ts. Okay, let's start with that and then start looking into the LCA. What my concern for doing LCA in India is there is no enough data set available. So I would say that there are a couple of LEED well and BREEAM requirements for EPDs. That is environmental product declarations, which would talk about your embodied carbon and which would talk about emissions. Those data set is not hardly available in India. So not all companies have started publishing these data set. However, it has been a start. Quite a few companies in terms of steel, cement, they have started publishing this data set. Glazing, we have started looking into these data set, but we don't have a complete picture for each of these products which goes into a building construction stage. So I think that LCA can be mandated, or we'll see that probably is the next future. But however, we'll be able to start talking about in next 1 or 2 years timeline. So,
but energy, I think the time has come, right, Mansi?
Absolutely. Energy efficiencies, I think it's not very difficult to do, as it is considered that energy efficient buildings are expensive. That's a myth. Energy efficient buildings are not expensive. I worked on a net zero project where the overall budget specifically for net zero energy was roughly around 4% of the overall project budget. Can you believe? 4% of the overall project budget. So when you look into it, 100 crores, the whole project, say it was for 100 crore, only 4 crore went into energy efficiency to make it net zero. So I say that, if you do it in a right way, not only for certification, not only look into IGBC, GREEA and LEED, but if you do in a right way, into a design approach, then definitely that's a possibility. So getting all the consultants on board from day one, doing the master planning to the concept design to schematic design, and start incorporating and implementing all of those measures, then that's a possibility. And I have one suggestion for all the architects out there who might be in our call, to start looking into codes and their guides. Okay, please start looking into ECBC, start looking into Eco-Nivas Samhita. They have a very, straightforward requirements in terms of efficient envelope or shading or, HVAC system. All of that is so simply explained. And then there are these numbers which are definitely given, So probably they can do that to make buildings efficient. And I think architects has to take that responsibility to start coming up with that.
Mansi, I think we've covered an overall about net zero carbon buildings, and we also touched about energy efficiency and how we can take small steps towards achieving it, and finally be conscious about how everything will act during the operation stage. So we did cover a lot of topics today. And for me, this just personally felt like another chat with you. So I'm so happy to catch up virtually with you as well, like this. So thank you so much, Mansi. I had so much fun interviewing you, and I'm sure our viewers did too. So thank you so much for saying yes to my podcast, and I hope you had fun too.
I had so much fun, Karen. It was amazing. Thank you, Shruti.
Thank you, Mansi, and thank you to our viewers. Stay tuned for more episodes under No Planet B. Good night,
Thank you.
Mansi.
Thank you. Good night. Bye.
Bye.